The fluorescent lights of Chicago General's emergency department buzzed like dying insects above Elena Martinez's head as she pressed her palms against the small chest of 8-year-old Sophia Valdez. The little girl's skin, mottled with burns from a house fire, felt like crumpled paper under her touch. "Come on, baby," Elena whispered, pumping air into tiny lungs that refused to respond. "Come back to us." The heart monitor's flat line stretched across the screen like an accusation. Dr. James Morrison placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder, but she shrugged it away, continuing compressions with mechanical precision. Her dark hair, streaked with premature silver, fell across her face as she worked. "Elena." James's voice carried the weight of inevitability. "It's been 40 minutes. She looked up at him, her brown eyes fierce with denial. "I can save her. You can't save them all." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena's hands stilled on the child's chest. Around her, the emergency room continued its chaotic dance of life and death, but in this small curtained space, time had stopped. "You can't save them all." Just like she couldn't save Isabella. Elena stepped back from the table, her hands trembling as she pulled off her gloves. The little girl's face was peaceful now, unmarked by the fire that had claimed her life. She looked like she was sleeping, like Isabella used to sleep, with her dark lashes fanned against pale cheeks. "Time of death, 11:47 p.m., James said softly. Elena walked out of the trauma bay without a word, her footsteps echoing in the corridor that suddenly felt too narrow, too bright, too suffocating. She pushed through the hospital's back exit into the Chicago night, where November rain fell like tears from a grieving sky. The cold bit through her scrubs, but she welcomed it. Pain was familiar. Pain was honest. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Maria. Tried calling. "Dinner Sunday? The kids miss their Tia." Elena stared at the words until they blurred. She couldn't face Maria's perfect family, couldn't pretend to smile at her nephew and niece when their laughter reminded her of what she'd lost. What she'd killed with her carelessness, her stupidity, her. Stop. She forced the thought away. She'd been down that path too many times. It led nowhere but deeper into the darkness. Her apartment was a 15-minute drive through South Side Chicago, past the projects where she'd grown up, past the diner where she'd worked through nursing school, past the intersection where everything had changed 3 years ago. She didn't look as she drove past Ashland and 47th. She never looked. The apartment building was a tired brick structure from the 1960s, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked no questions. Elena's unit was on the 3rd floor. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette that barely deserved the name, and a living room dominated by medical textbooks she couldn't bring herself to donate. She poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a coffee mug, the only clean glass left, and sank onto her couch. The silence pressed against her eardrums like water. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Chicago never slept. But sometimes Elena wondered if that was a mercy or a curse. The whiskey burned her throat, but not enough to wash away the taste of failure. Not enough to erase the image of Sophia Valdez's still face, or Isabella's, or the dozen other children she'd watched slip away despite her best efforts. You can't save them all. But she had to try. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. The only thing that justified the space she took up in the world. Every life she saved was a small payment against the debt she'd never be able to repay. She was reaching for the bottle again when she heard it. A soft knock at her door. So soft she almost missed it. Elena frowned. It was past midnight. Her neighbors weren't the visiting type, and Maria would have called first. She set down her mug and moved to the door, peering through the peephole. 3 children stood in the hallway. Boys, she realized, ranging in age from maybe 8 to 12. They were soaked from the rain, their clothes torn and dirty. The oldest held the hands of the younger 2, his thin shoulders squared with protective determination that reminded her painfully of. She opened the door before she could stop herself. "Please," the oldest boy said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "We need help." Elena looked at them. 3 faces turned up to hers with desperate hope, 3 pairs of eyes that had seen too much for their age. The youngest was maybe Tommy's age when she'd last seen her nephew. The middle boy had Miguel Santos's gentle features from the missing persons report she'd seen at the hospital last month. And the oldest looked like every child who'd ever been failed by the adults who were supposed to protect them. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice softer than she'd intended. "There was a fire," the boy said. "At Harbor House. Everyone got out, but—" he swallowed hard. "But we can't go back. We can't go anywhere, they'll look for us." Elena's medical training kicked in automatically. She scanned them for injuries. The middle boy favored his left leg. The youngest showed signs of smoke inhalation, and the oldest had defensive wounds on his knuckles. They were scared, exhausted, and running on adrenaline. They needed help. But Elena had learned the hard way that helping people, especially children, came with a price she wasn't sure she could pay again. "There are shelters," she said carefully. "Social services. People trained for this kind of thing." "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. "Please, we just need somewhere to stay tonight. Somewhere safe. I promise we won't cause trouble." The youngest boy started coughing, a wet sound that made Elena's nurse instincts override her caution. She knelt in front of him, noting the pallor around his lips, the way his small chest struggled for air. "When did you breathe in the smoke, baby?" she asked. "Few hours ago," the oldest answered for him. "Is he gonna be okay?" Elena looked at the 3 of them, homeless, scared, and vulnerable. Everything she'd sworn to avoid after Isabella's death. Children were complications. Children were heartbreak waiting to happen. Children were. "Come inside," she heard herself say. The apartment felt impossibly small with 4 people in it. Elena directed them to the couch while she grabbed her medical bag from the bedroom. The youngest boy, Tommy, she decided to call him until he told her otherwise, sat between his companions like a small bird sheltered between protective wings. "I'm Elena," she said, returning with supplies. "What are your names?" "I'm David," the oldest said. "This is Miguel, and that's Tommy." She knelt in front of Tommy, listening to his lungs with her stethoscope. "Deep breaths for me, sweetheart." His breathing was labored but not critical. Smoke inhalation, but not severe enough for hospitalization. She could monitor him here, make sure he didn't develop complications. Here, as if she'd already decided they were staying. "Miguel, let me look at that leg." The boy's pants were torn at the knee, revealing a gash that would need cleaning and bandaging. Not deep enough for stitches, but it would hurt for a while. "David, your hands." The oldest boy, he couldn't be more than 12, but something in his eyes seemed ancient, held out his knuckles reluctantly. The wounds were fresh, consistent with punching something hard. Or someone. "Who did you fight?" Elena asked as she cleaned the cuts. David's jaw tightened. Someone who deserved it. She'd seen that look before, in her own mirror. The look of someone carrying guilt too heavy for their years. "Did you win?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yeah, this time." Elena's heart clenched. How many times had this boy had to fight? How many times had he stood between his younger companions and whatever threatened them? Like she should have stood between Isabella and— "Are you hungry?" she asked, pushing the thought away. 3 sets of eyes lit up with hope. When had they last eaten? Elena's kitchen wasn't much, but she had soup, bread, milk that was probably still good. Enough to feed 3 children for one night. Just one night. Then she'd figure out what to do with them. As she heated soup on her ancient stovetop, Elena listened to the boys talk in low voices. David was clearly the leader, making plans and reassuring the younger ones. Miguel had a gentle way of speaking that suggested intelligence and kindness. Tommy said little, but his eyes followed everything, processing and cataloging like a computer. They reminded her of the children she'd read about in case files during her brief stint in pediatric nursing. System kids. Foster kids. Children who'd learned to rely on each other because the adults in their lives couldn't be trusted. Children like she'd once been. "Mrs. Elena?" Tommy's voice was small but clear. "Are you gonna call the police?" She turned to find 3 pairs of eyes watching her with careful hope and prepared disappointment. They'd asked this question before, she realized. Asked it and received answers that taught them to expect betrayal. "Do you want me to call the police?" she asked. David shook his head quickly. "They won't understand. They'll split us up. We stay together," Miguel added quietly. "Always. Always," Tommy echoed. Elena ladled soup into mismatched bowls, her hands steadier than they'd been all evening. These children had made a pact, a promise to protect each other no matter what. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and exactly the kind of bond that had once existed between her and. She set the bowls on her small table and watched the boys eat with the focused intensity of people who'd known real hunger. David ate fastest, but she noticed him giving some of his bread to Tommy when he thought she wasn't looking. "David," she said carefully, "how long have you 3 been together?" 2 years, he answered without hesitation. "Since Harbor House. That's the children's home that burned down tonight?" His expression shuddered. "Yeah, what about before? Your families?" David's spoon stilled in his bowl. "We don't talk about before." The finality in his voice told Elena everything she needed to know. Whatever had happened to these boys before Harbor House, it was bad enough that a burning building seemed like freedom rather than tragedy. She'd been there once, known that particular kind of desperation. After dinner, Elena gave them blankets and pillows, converting her living room into a makeshift dormitory. The boys settled down with the practiced efficiency of people accustomed to sleeping in unfamiliar places, but she noticed David didn't close his eyes. He lay still, listening, ready to protect his makeshift family if danger came calling. Elena retreated to her bedroom but left the door open. She could hear their whispered conversations, Tommy's occasional cough, the sound of 3 children trying to comfort each other in a world that had shown them little kindness. She'd been staring at the ceiling for an hour when her phone rang. The display showed an unknown number, but something made her answer. "Elena Martinez?" The voice was cultured, pleasant, completely at odds with the chill it sent down her spine. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been looking forward to speaking with you for a very long time. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Elena's blood went cold. She sat up in bed, automatically lowering her voice. "I don't know what you're talking about." 3 young boys. David, Miguel, and Tommy. Such devoted children. Such a close little family. The phone felt slippery in Elena's suddenly sweaty palm. "How do you know about them?" "My dear Elena, I've been watching those boys for years. Just as I've been watching you." "What do you want?" A soft chuckle. "That's a complicated question. What I want, what I need, what I deserve. They're not always the same thing. But tonight, I simply want what's mine returned to me." Elena stood up, moving to her bedroom door. She could see David's profile in the dim light from the hallway. He was still awake, still guarding his brothers. "They're not yours," she said quietly. "Aren't they? I've fed them, sheltered them, provided for their needs. I've been more of a father to those boys than their biological parents ever were." "What happened at Harbor House tonight?" Another pause. "An unfortunate accident. Electrical fire, very tragic. But insurance will cover the damages, and we'll rebuild. The important thing is that the children are safe." "Safe from what?" "From people who don't understand their value. From authorities who would separate them. From well-meaning individuals who think they know what's best for children who've experienced specialized care." Elena's nursing background had exposed her to enough case files to recognize the coded language. You're talking about abuse. I'm talking about preparing children for reality. The world is harsh, Elena. It takes and takes until there's nothing left. I've taught those boys to be strong, to survive, to protect each other. Isn't that what love looks like? The man's reasonable tone made his words even more chilling. Elena gripped the phone tighter. Love doesn't hurt children, doesn't it? Tell me, Elena, didn't love hurt when you lost your daughter? The air left Elena's lungs in a rush. What did you? Isabella Martinez, age 7. Died in a car accident 3 years ago while her mother was driving under the influence. Such a tragedy. Such unnecessary pain. Elena's legs gave out. She slid down the doorframe to sit on the floor, the phone pressed to her ear like a lifeline to hell. I know all about you, Elena. Your childhood in foster care. Your struggles with alcohol after Isabella's death. Your desperate need to save children as penance for the one you couldn't save. It's quite touching, really. Who are you? She whispered. Someone who understands loss. Someone who knows what it means to love children so much it hurts. The difference between us is that I've learned to channel that love into something productive. You're sick. I'm practical. Those boys need guidance, structure, purpose. You're offering them what? Sentiment? False hope? The same kind of reckless care that killed your daughter? The words hit like physical blows. Elena doubled over, bile rising in her throat. Here's what's going to happen. The voice continued, still pleasant, still reasonable. Tomorrow morning, you're going to bring those boys to Pier 47. Warehouse District. 10 a.m. sharp. No. Elena. No. I won't let you hurt them. A soft sigh. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. I really was. You see, I've grown quite fond of you over the years. Watching you work at the hospital, seeing how desperately you try to save every child that comes through those doors. It's admirable. Futile, but admirable. What do you mean, watching me? Did you think it was coincidence that those boys ended up at your door tonight? Did you think it was luck that led them to the one person in Chicago most likely to take in 3 homeless children without asking too many questions? Elena's blood turned to ice. You sent them here. I guided them here. Just as I've been guiding their lives for the past 2 years, preparing them for this moment. What moment? The moment when you choose between saving 3 children and saving yourself. The moment when you prove that love really is stronger than fear. Or that it isn't. Elena could hear David stirring in the living room, probably sensing her distress even from across the apartment. These boys had learned to read danger in adult voices, to recognize when the people who claimed to care about them were about to fail them. She wouldn't be another failure. She couldn't be. What do you want? She asked again. I want you to understand that there are no heroes in this story, Elena. No perfect choices. No endings where everyone lives happily ever after. There are only people trying to survive in a world that doesn't care about their pain. That's not true, isn't it? Your daughter is dead because you chose alcohol over responsibility. Those boys are homeless because the adults who should have protected them chose their own needs first. I'm the only person who's ever put their welfare above my own comfort. By abusing them? By preparing them for reality. By teaching them that strength comes from solidarity, that family means protecting each other no matter the cost. Lessons you're about to learn yourself. Elena closed her eyes, trying to think. 3 children depended on her making the right choice, but she didn't even know what the right choice was. Turn them over to this monster? Run? Call the police and risk having the boys separated or, worse, returned to whatever hell they'd escaped from? Elena? David's voice came from the living room, soft and worried. She looked up to find him standing in the doorway, his 2 old eyes taking in her distressed state with the practiced assessment of a child who'd learned to gauge adult moods for his own survival. I'm okay, baby, she whispered, covering the phone's mouthpiece. He didn't believe her. She could see it in his face. But he nodded and returned to his makeshift bed, ready to pretend everything was fine if that's what she needed from him. The kindness of it broke her heart. 10 a.m., the voice repeated. Pier 47. Come alone, bring the boys, and maybe we can work out an arrangement that doesn't end in tears. And if I don't? Then you'll learn what it really means to lose children you love. And this time, Elena, it won't be an accident. The line went dead. Elena sat on her bedroom floor, staring at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had been watching her. Someone had deliberately sent 3 vulnerable children to her door, knowing she wouldn't be able to turn them away. Someone was using her guilt over Isabella's death as a weapon to manipulate her into compliance. But why? What did this person really want? She looked out at the living room, where 3 boys slept fitfully on her couch and floor. David had one arm stretched protectively over Tommy, even in sleep. Miguel's hand was curled around a small wooden cross that hung from a chain around his neck. They trusted her. Despite having every reason to distrust adults, they'd put their safety in her hands. You can't save them all. Maybe not, but she could save these 3. Elena stood up, her decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. She wouldn't take them to Pier 47. She wouldn't hand them over to whatever monster had been controlling their lives. Instead, she'd do what she should have done 3 years ago when Isabella begged to stay home sick from school. What she should have done instead of drinking that morning, instead of getting behind the wheel, instead of. She'd be the adult these children deserved. Even if it killed her. Elena moved quietly to her dresser, pulling out clothes and essentials. If they were going to run, they needed to do it before dawn. Before this person realized she had no intention of keeping their appointment. She was stuffing underwear into a duffel bag when she heard it, the soft creak of floorboards in the hallway outside her apartment. Elena froze. The building was old, floors creaked all the time. But something about this sound was different. Purposeful. Stealthy. Someone was out there. She moved to her bedroom door, listening. The creaking stopped directly outside her apartment. Elena held her breath, straining to hear over the thundering of her own heartbeat. A soft knock. So soft she almost missed it. Just like the boys' knock hours earlier. Elena crept to the living room, where David was already sitting up, alert and tense. The other boys stirred but didn't wake. Stay here, Elena whispered. She moved to the front door, peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but a manila envelope lay on the floor just outside her threshold. Elena waited 5 full minutes before opening the door. The envelope was thick, expensive paper, and it was addressed to her in elegant handwriting. Inside were photographs, pictures of her leaving the hospital, pictures of her buying groceries, pictures of her sitting in her car outside Isabella's grave. Pictures of the boys entering her building tonight. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper with a message written in the same elegant script. Asterisk. Some choices can't be unmade, Elena. Some debts can't be repaid. But some gifts shouldn't be refused. 10 a.m. Don't disappoint me. Your devoted father, asterisk. Elena's hands shook as she read the last line again. Your devoted father. It wasn't possible. Her father had abandoned her when she was 5, disappeared into the system like so many deadbeat dads before him. She had no memories of him beyond a vague impression of cigarette smoke and angry voices. But someone wanted her to believe he was back. Someone wanted her to think that 37 years later, the man who'd thrown her away like garbage had returned to claim some kind of paternal authority over her life. The cruelest part was how badly she wanted it to be true. Even knowing it was manipulation, even understanding the danger, some small part of her heart leapt at the possibility that someone had been watching over her all these years. That her abandonment hadn't been complete indifference but some twisted form of love. Elena? David appeared at her shoulder, looking at the photographs in her hands. His young face went pale. He found us. Who is he, David? The boy's jaw clenched with familiar stubbornness. Someone we thought we'd never have to see again. Is he really your? She couldn't finish the question. Father? David's laugh was bitter, too old for his 12 years. He likes to think so. He told us once that biology doesn't matter, that families are made by choice and sacrifice. He said he chose us. He said we belonged to him. Elena knelt to David's eye level. What did he do to you? What didn't he do? David's voice was barely a whisper. He called it training, preparation. He said the world was full of predators, and we had to learn to be stronger than our prey instincts. David, he made us fight each other for food. Made us compete for his approval. Made us watch while he. David stopped, his face crumpling. While he hurt other kids. Kids who weren't strong enough. Weren't worthy. Elena's heart shattered. She pulled David into her arms, feeling his thin body tremble with suppressed sobs. He can't have you, she whispered fiercely. I won't let him. You don't understand. David pulled back, his eyes ancient with pain. He doesn't just want us back. He wants you too. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Everything that happened tonight, everything that led us here, it was all part of his game. What game? Proving that he's right. That love is just another kind of control. That families are built on fear, not choice. Elena stood up, her mind racing. If this man had orchestrated the boy's arrival at her door, if he'd been watching her for years, then running wasn't going to work. He'd anticipate that move. He'd be prepared. But maybe he wasn't prepared for her to fight back. David, I need you to wake Miguel and Tommy. We're leaving. Where are we going? Elena looked at the photographs scattered on her floor, at the message signed by a monster calling himself her father. She thought about Sophia Valdez, about Isabella, about all the children she'd failed to save. She thought about the woman she used to be before grief and guilt had made her afraid of her own shadow. We're going to end this, she said. But not the way he expects. David's eyes widened. What do you mean? Elena moved to her bedroom, pulling out a lockbox from under her bed. Inside was something she hadn't touched in 3 years. A .38 revolver her ex-husband had insisted she keep for protection. She'd hated the weight of it then, the cold promise of violence it represented. Now it felt like salvation. Elena, no. David had followed her, his voice urgent. You can't fight him with guns. He's too smart, too prepared. He'll use it against you. Then what do you suggest? She checked the cylinder, still loaded, and slipped the gun into her jacket pocket. We don't go to the pier. We don't play his game at all. He'll find us, David. You said so yourself. Maybe. But maybe we find help first. Real help. Elena paused. What kind of help? David's expression was thoughtful, calculating. There's someone who might believe us. Someone who's been looking for him for a long time. Who? A detective. Sarah Chen. She was at Harbor House last week, asking questions about missing kids, about patterns in the foster system. She gave me her card, told me to call if I ever remembered anything important. Elena felt a flicker of hope. You think she'd help us? I think she's the only adult who might listen to 3 runaway kids and a nurse with a drinking problem. The brutal honesty of his assessment stung, but Elena recognized truth when she heard it. Where's the card? David dug into his jacket pocket, producing a crumpled business card. Detective Sarah Chen, Chicago PD, Crimes Against Children Unit. Elena stared at the card, weighing their options. Trust law enforcement and risk having the boys taken into protective custody, which might mean being returned to the very system that had failed them. Or face this monster alone and likely get all 4 of them killed. Neither choice was good, but one of them might keep the boys alive long enough for someone to listen to their story. She pulled out her phone and dialed. The call went to voicemail. Elena's heart sank until she heard the message. This is Detective Chen. If this is an emergency involving a child's safety, press 1 to be transferred to my emergency line." Elena pressed 1. The phone rang twice before a tired voice answered. "Chen here. Detective, you don't know me, but I have 3 children with me who say you've been investigating missing kids from Harbor House." A pause. Background noise. Chen was somewhere public, maybe a restaurant or bar. "Who is this?" "Elena Martinez. I'm a nurse at Chicago General. These boys came to me tonight after Harbor House burned down, and someone's been calling me, threatening them, claiming to be there." "Hold on." The background noise faded as Chen moved somewhere quieter. "Did you say Harbor House burned down?" "Yes, tonight. David, Miguel, and Tommy are with me now, and they're scared. They say you gave David your card." "Jesus. David Chen? Asian kid, about 12, old eyes?" Elena looked at David, who was listening intently. "Chen? Is that your real last name?" David shook his head. "I lied. Thought it might help if she thought we were related. It's David, and yes, he matches that description." "Where are you now?" Elena hesitated. "My apartment. But detective, someone's been watching me. Watching all of us. He wants me to bring the boys to Pier 47 in the morning." "Do not go to that pier. Do you understand me? Do not go anywhere near the waterfront." The urgency in Chen's voice sent ice through Elena's veins. "Why? What's at Pier 47? "Bodies, Ms. Martinez. 3 of them, all children who went missing from Harbor House over the past 2 years. We found them last month, but we've been keeping it quiet while we investigate." Elena's knees went weak. She sank onto her bed, the phone pressed to her ear like a lifeline. "He's been killing them." "Who's been killing them?" "I don't know his real name. He called me, said he was my father, but that's impossible. My father left when I was 5. Ms. Martinez, I need you to listen carefully. Pack whatever you need for a few days. Take the boys and meet me at the 12th District Station. Do it now, do it quietly, and if anyone follows you, call 911 immediately." Elena stood up, her nurse training kicking in automatically. Crisis management. Triage. Prioritize immediate threats and deal with everything else later. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. "I'll be waiting." Elena hung up and turned to find 3 pairs of eyes watching her with expressions ranging from hope to terror. Tommy had woken up during the call and was sitting close to Miguel, his small hand clutching the older boy's shirt. "We're going to the police station," Elena announced. "Detective Chen is going to help us." "What if it's a trap?" Miguel asked quietly. What if he got to her too? It was a fair question. Elena had been thinking the same thing. But staying here wasn't an option. Running blindly wasn't an option. And waiting for morning meant walking into whatever hell this monster had prepared for them at the pier. "Then we'll deal with that when we get there," she said. "But right now, she's the only chance we have." Elena packed quickly, clothes, medical supplies, what little cash she had on hand. The boys had nothing to pack except the clothes on their backs and whatever secrets they carried in their young hearts. As they prepared to leave, Elena noticed David lingering by her bookshelf, staring at a framed photograph she'd forgotten was there. It showed her and Isabella at Navy Pier last summer before the accident, both of them laughing at something beyond the camera's view. "She looks like you," David said softly. She was beautiful, inside and out. Elena's throat tightened. "She would have liked you boys. All of you. What happened to her?" Elena had told the story so many times to therapists, to support groups, to herself in the mirror at 3 a.m. when the guilt made sleep impossible. But somehow, telling these 3 children felt different. More honest. More necessary. "I made a terrible mistake," she said simply. "I was drinking too much after losing my job, after my husband left, after everything fell apart. Isabella asked me to drive her to school one morning, and I thought I was fine. I thought I could handle it. David nodded with the understanding of someone who'd seen adults make catastrophic choices in the name of love. The other driver ran a red light, Elena continued. It wasn't my fault, technically. But if I'd been sober, if my reflexes had been better, if I'd been the mother she deserved instead of a drunk feeling sorry for herself. You might have saved her, Tommy finished quietly. Or you might have died too. Elena looked at this small, serious boy with surprise. That's very wise. That's what Miguel told me when my mom died. That sometimes bad things happen no matter what anybody does. That wondering, what if, is just another way of hurting yourself. Miguel flushed at being mentioned. My grandmother used to say that God doesn't give us more than we can carry. But sometimes he forgets to tell us how strong we really are. Elena felt tears threatening. These children, these beautiful, damaged, impossibly resilient children, were teaching her about forgiveness. About carrying grief without letting it destroy you. About finding family in the most unexpected places. We should go, David said gently. Detective Chen is waiting. Elena took one last look around her apartment. This place that had been both sanctuary and prison for the past 3 years. She'd come here to hide from the world, to nurse her guilt and solitude. But tonight, the world had come to her in the form of 3 boys who needed her to be braver than she'd ever been. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. They made their way down to the parking garage, Elena's senses hyperalert for any sign of surveillance. The boys moved like ghosts, their footsteps silent, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. They'd learned these skills the hard way, and Elena's heart ached for the innocence they'd never had. Her car was a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper from the accident. She'd kept meaning to fix it, but somehow the damage felt appropriate. A visible reminder of her failures. As they pulled out of the garage, Elena caught a glimpse of movement in her rearview mirror. A black sedan, parked across the street with its engine running. We're being followed, she said quietly. David twisted to look back. Silver sedan. I saw it earlier tonight when we were walking to your building. How long has it been there? Hours. Maybe all night. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. If this monster had been watching her apartment all night, he knew they were leaving. He probably knew where they were going. But Detective Chen had said she'd be waiting at the station. If this was a trap, at least it would be sprung in a place with backup, with witnesses, with some hope of justice. Elena turned onto Lake Shore Drive, Chicago's skyline glittering to her right like a promise of civilization and law and order. The black sedan followed at a discreet distance, neither closing the gap nor falling behind. Elena, Miguel said from the back seat, can I ask you something? Of course, baby. Why did you let us in tonight? You don't know us. We could have been dangerous. Elena glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Miguel's earnest gaze. Because you reminded me of someone I used to be. Someone who needed help and didn't know how to ask for it. Were you in the system too? David asked. Foster care from age 5 to 18. Group homes, mostly. A few families who tried their best, but… Elena shrugged. Nobody wants a kid who's old enough to remember being abandoned. Is that why you became a nurse? Tommy asked. To help kids like us? I became a nurse because I wanted to save people. But after Isabella died, I realized I was trying to save myself. Trying to prove I wasn't the kind of person who destroys everything she touches. You didn't destroy Isabella, David said firmly. Bad things happened, but that doesn't make you a bad person. The simple kindness of it nearly broke Elena's composure. These children, who had every reason to distrust adults, who had been betrayed and hurt and abandoned by the people who should have protected them, were offering her absolution. Thank you, she whispered. The 12th District Station was a fortress of brick and concrete, its windows glowing yellow against the night sky. Elena pulled into the visitor parking lot, noting that the black sedan had disappeared somewhere during the last few blocks. Had they lost their tail? Or was Detective Chen right, and this was exactly where their pursuer wanted them to go? "Stay close," Elena said as they walked toward the entrance. "If anything feels wrong, if anyone tries to separate us, you run. Do you understand?" 3 nods. 3 young faces set with determination. The desk sergeant was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who barely glanced up from her paperwork when they approached. "We're here to see Detective Chen," Elena said. "She's expecting us." "Name?" "Elena Martinez. I called about Harbor House." The sergeant's expression sharpened. She picked up her phone, spoke briefly, then hung up. "She'll be right down." They waited in hard plastic chairs, surrounded by the institutional ambiance of fluorescent lights and disinfectant. Elena watched the boys take in their surroundings with the wary assessment of people who'd learned that authority figures were as likely to hurt as help. "Ms. Martinez?" Elena turned to see a woman approaching, Asian American, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and the kind of solid presence that came from years of dealing with Chicago's worst impulses. Detective Chen studied the boys with professional interest. "David, Miguel, Tommy. I'm glad you're safe." David stood up, extending his hand with formal politeness that broke Elena's heart. "Thank you for seeing us, Detective Chen. Let's go somewhere we can talk privately." Chen led them to a small conference room with a table, chairs, and recording equipment. She poured water for everyone before settling across from Elena with a legal pad and pen. "Before we start," Chen said, "I need you to understand that everything you tell me tonight may become part of a criminal investigation. Are you comfortable with that?" Elena nodded. "These children are in danger. Whatever it takes to keep them safe." "Good. Now, tell me everything that's happened since Harbor House burned down." Elena recounted the night's events. The boys' arrival, the threatening phone call, the photographs, the message signed, "Your devoted father." David filled in details about their time at Harbor House, about the man who claimed to be their protector but treated them like possessions. Chen took notes, asking clarifying questions, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "The voice on the phone," she said finally. "Did you recognize it at all? Any accent, speech patterns, anything distinctive? Educated, well-spoken. He sounded like." Elena searched for the right comparison. "Like a professor. Someone accustomed to being listened to, respected." "David, in all your time at Harbor House, did this man ever use a name?" David shook his head. He said names were just labels. That what mattered was the relationship, not what people called each other. "But the staff must have called him something." "Mr. Webb," Miguel said quietly. "I heard one of the counselors call him Mr. Webb once." Chen's pen stopped moving. "Marcus Webb? You know him?" Elena asked. "I know of him. He's been on our radar for years, but we've never been able to make anything stick. Officially, he's a philanthropist who funds children's charities. Unofficially, he's suspected of running a network that traffics vulnerable kids." Elena felt sick. "And Harbor House was part of his network?" "We think so. But proving it is another matter. Webb is careful, connected, and very good at covering his tracks." "What about the bodies you found at Pier 47? Chen's expression darkened. 3 children, ages 8 to 14, all former residents of Harbor House. All officially listed as runaways who disappeared over the past 2 years. How did they die? I can't discuss details of an ongoing investigation, but..." Chen looked at the boys, then back at Elena. "Let's just say Webb has very specific ideas about discipline." Elena reached for David's hand, finding it cold and trembling. "You knew them, didn't you? The children who died?" David nodded, tears threatening. "Sarah was 10. She used to sing lullabies to the younger kids when they had nightmares. Marcus said she was getting too attached, too soft. She disappeared one day, and he told us she'd been adopted by a family in California." "And the others?" "Ben and Carlos. They tried to run away together. Got caught at the bus station." Marcus brought them back in. David's voice broke. We never saw them again. He said they'd been transferred to a facility better equipped to handle troubled children. Elena wanted to pull all 3 boys into her arms, to promise them that monsters like Webb would never hurt them again. But she'd learned better than to make promises she might not be able to keep. "Detective," she said, "what happens now? Can you protect them?" Chen hesitated. "I can place them in protective custody while we investigate. But that means foster care, probably separated, at least temporarily." "No." The word came from all 3 boys simultaneously. "We stay together," David said firmly. "That's non-negotiable." "David, I understand." "No, you don't." David's voice carried a quiet authority that seemed to fill the small room. "You think family is about paperwork and legal guardianship and following proper procedures. But family is about choosing to protect each other when nobody else will. These are my brothers. Elena is." He looked at her with eyes too old for his face. "Elena is the first adult who's ever chosen us over her own convenience. We stay together." Chen looked between Elena and the boys, taking in their united front. "Ms. Martinez, are you prepared to take legal guardianship of 3 children you met tonight?" Elena thought about her empty apartment, her limited income, her history of alcohol abuse and poor decisions. She thought about Isabella, about the children she'd failed to save at the hospital, about the woman she'd been before grief had made her afraid of her own shadow. She thought about David's protective instincts, Miguel's gentle wisdom, Tommy's quiet intelligence. She thought about the family they'd already become in the space of a few hours. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." Chen smiled for the first time since they'd met. "In that case, we have work to do. But first, I need to make some calls, get some people down here who can help us figure out how to keep you all safe." As Chen left the room, Elena found herself alone with 3 boys who'd trusted her with their lives. The weight of that responsibility should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Are you sure about this?" David asked quietly. "Taking us in permanently? It won't be easy. We all have issues." Elena smiled, thinking of her own issues, her own scars. "Baby, I think we're going to fit together just fine." Outside the conference room, she could hear Chen making calls, coordinating with other departments, building the case that would hopefully put Marcus Webb away forever. It would be complicated, dangerous, and there were no guarantees they'd succeed. But for the first time in 3 years, Elena Martinez wasn't just surviving from one shift to the next. She was fighting for something. Someone. A family that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. The boys were quiet, processing the magnitude of what they'd committed to. Elena understood. She'd been running from emotional attachment for so long that the idea of intentional family felt both miraculous and terrifying. But some things were worth the risk of being hurt again. Some things were worth everything. Detective Chen returned to the conference room 30 minutes later, accompanied by a tall man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "This is Assistant District Attorney Michael Harrison," Chen announced. "He's going to help us navigate the legal aspects of your situation." Harrison sat down across from Elena, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Martinez, I understand you want to provide temporary care for these children while we investigate their circumstances." "Not temporary," Elena said firmly. "Permanent. They're my family now." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ms. Martinez, with respect, you met these children 12 hours ago. Family court doesn't typically approve permanent placements without extensive background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations." "How long does all that take?" David interrupted. "Months. Maybe longer." "We don't have months," Elena said. "If Marcus Webb is as dangerous as Detective Chen suggests, every day these boys spend in the system is a day he has to find them." Chen leaned forward. There might be a way around the usual procedures. If we can demonstrate immediate and credible threat to the children's safety, we can request emergency custody orders. It's not permanent, but it would keep them with you while we build a case against Webb. What kind of evidence would you need? Elena asked. More than we have right now, Harrison admitted. Webb's lawyers will claim the children were removed from Harbor House for their own protection after the fire. They'll say he was trying to keep them safe, not harm them. But they found bodies at Pier 47, Miguel said quietly. Children from Harbor House. Children who disappeared months ago, Harrison replied gently. Webb will claim he had nothing to do with their deaths. Without witnesses, without physical evidence linking him to the murders, it's just circumstantial. Elena felt a familiar frustration building. The same bureaucratic maze that had failed these boys before was failing them again. Adults making decisions based on paperwork instead of protecting vulnerable children. What if we could get him to confess? She asked. Chen and Harrison exchanged a glance. What do you mean? Chen asked. He wants to meet me at Pier 47 tomorrow morning. What if I go, but wearing a wire? What if we get him to talk about what he's done? Absolutely not, Chen said immediately. Too dangerous. We have no way to guarantee your safety, and even if we did, anything said under those circumstances might not be admissible in court. So what do you suggest? Elena's voice carried the edge of desperation. We hide these boys away forever? Hope Webb just gives up and disappears? We build a case the right way, Harrison said. Methodically. Carefully. We interview other children who lived at Harbor House. Look for patterns of abuse. Trace Webb's financial connections. How many more children die while you're building your careful case? David asked, his young voice cutting through the adults' discussion like a blade. The room fell silent. Elena looked at this 12-year-old boy who'd already seen more horror than most adults, who carried responsibility for 2 younger children on his thin shoulders, who understood better than anyone what was at stake. David's right, she said finally. Every day we wait is another day Webb has to hurt more children. Another day those boys have to live with the fear that he'll find them. Ms. Martinez, Chen said gently, I understand your frustration. Do you? Do you really? Elena stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over the police station's parking lot. Detective, how many children have you seen broken by the system? How many cases have you worked where everyone followed proper procedure while kids suffered? Chen's expression tightened. Elena had hit a nerve. I became a cop to protect children, Chen said quietly. But I've learned that sometimes protecting them means following the law, even when it's frustrating. And sometimes protecting them means breaking the law, Elena replied. Sometimes it means adults being willing to take risks that bureaucrats won't approve. Harrison cleared his throat. Ms. Martinez, I can't advise you to do anything illegal. I'm not asking for your advice. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. Elena turned back to the room, her decision crystallizing. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to Pier 47. I'm going to face Marcus Webb, and I'm going to get these boys the justice they deserve. Elena, no. David was on his feet now, his young face pale with fear. You can't. It's exactly what he wants. Maybe. But it's also the only way to end this. You could die. Elena knelt in front of David, taking his hands in hers. Baby, I died 3 years ago when Isabella was killed. I've been walking around like a ghost ever since, too scared to live, too guilty to move forward. You boys gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. What? A reason to fight. Miguel spoke up from his corner. What if we go with you? No. Elena's voice was firm. Absolutely not. Why not? Tommy asked. We're the witnesses. We're the ones who know what he did. You're children. It's not your job to face monsters. It's been our job our whole lives, David said quietly. At least this time, we wouldn't be facing him alone. Elena looked at these 3 boys. Children who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd learned survival skills that would serve them well as adults but had cost them their innocence. Part of her wanted to wrap them up and hide them away from all the darkness in the world. But another part of her recognized the truth in David's words. They'd been fighting this battle longer than she had. Maybe it was time to stop protecting them from their own strength. There's another option, Chen said slowly. Something that might work better than a wire. Everyone turned to look at her. We've been investigating Webb for 2 years. We know he uses Harbor House as a cover, but we've never been able to get inside his operation. We know he has other facilities, other children, but we don't know where. What are you suggesting? Harrison asked. I'm suggesting that maybe Ms. Martinez going to meet Webb isn't such a bad idea. But not to get a confession. To get information. Elena frowned. I don't understand. Webb didn't orchestrate this elaborate setup just to kill you at Pier 47. He could have done that any time over the past 3 years if that's what he wanted. No, he's got something else in mind. Something more personal. Like what? Chen hesitated. We think he's been preparing you. Watching you, studying you, learning everything about your psychological profile. The guilt about your daughter, your history in foster care, your need to save children, it's all connected. Connected how? We think he wants to recruit you. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair, trying to process what Chen was suggesting. Recruit me for what? His operation. Think about it. You're a nurse. You have access to vulnerable children through the hospital. You have personal experience with the foster system. You're exactly the kind of person Webb looks for when he's expanding his network. Elena felt sick. You think he killed Isabella to groom me? No, Chen said quickly. Isabella's death was an accident. But Webb is opportunistic. He saw your grief, your guilt, your desperate need for redemption, and he figured out how to use it. Harrison leaned forward. Detective Chen, are you suggesting we use Ms. Martinez as an undercover operative? I'm suggesting we give Webb what he thinks he wants. Ms. Martinez shows up at Pier 47, appears to be broken and desperate. Lets him believe he can manipulate her into joining his organization. She gets inside, gathers intelligence on his other operations, identifies other victims. That's insane, David said flatly. Elena's not a cop. She's not trained for undercover work. No, but she's motivated. And Webb already thinks he has psychological leverage over her. Elena found her voice. How long would it take? Weeks, maybe months. You'd have to convince him you were willing to participate in his operation, gain his trust, gather evidence from the inside. And what happens to the boys during all this? We place them in protective custody under assumed identities. Somewhere Webb can't find them. No, all 3 boys said simultaneously. We stay with Elena, David added. Whatever she does, wherever she goes, we go too. That's not possible, Harrison said. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous, Miguel replied. At least this way, we're together. Elena looked at these 3 children who'd been through hell and somehow emerged with their capacity for love intact. They were asking her to trust them, to let them be part of the solution instead of just victims to be protected. It went against every instinct she had as both a mother figure and a medical professional. Children were supposed to be sheltered from adult problems, not asked to participate in solving them. But these weren't typical children. They'd already proven they were survivors, fighters, protectors of each other. Maybe it was time to stop underestimating what they were capable of. If we do this, Elena said slowly, if we go undercover to expose Webb's operation, what guarantees do we have? None, Chen said honestly. It's dangerous, complicated, and there's a good chance it won't work. But it's better than hiding forever, David said. And it gives us a chance to save other kids, Miguel added. Kids like Sarah and Ben and Carlos, Tommy finished quietly. Elena closed her eyes, thinking about Isabella. About the promise she'd made at her daughter's grave to somehow make up for her failures as a mother. About the children she'd been unable to save in the About the 3 boys who'd shown up at her door and given her a reason to fight again. "Okay," she said finally. "We do this. But we do it together." Chen nodded slowly. "I'll need to clear this with my superiors. And we'll need to set up extensive backup protocols, communication systems, extraction plans." "How long do we have to prepare?" Elena asked. "Webb expects you at Pier 47 at 10 a.m. It's almost 3 now. 7 hours. Elena felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. In the she'd learned to make life and death decisions with incomplete information and insufficient time. This wasn't different. "Then we better get started." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Chen introduced them to other members of her task force, FBI agents who'd been tracking Webb's network across multiple states, child psychologists who would help prepare the boys for what they might encounter, technical specialists who fitted Elena with sophisticated recording equipment. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Elena would meet Webb at Pier 47 as scheduled. She'd appear broken, desperate, willing to do anything to protect the boys. When Webb made his recruitment pitch, and Chen was confident he would, Elena would express interest but demand to see proof of his operation before committing. That would get her inside. Once there, she'd gather evidence, identify other victims, and work with law enforcement to coordinate simultaneous raids on all of Webb's facilities. The boys would stay with Elena throughout, both as cover for her maternal motivation and as witnesses who could identify Webb's associates. It wasn't ideal from a child safety perspective, but it was better than the alternative of letting Webb continue his operations unchallenged. As dawn broke over Chicago, Elena found herself in the backseat of an unmarked police car, heading toward what might be the most important confrontation of her life. David sat beside her, Miguel and Tommy across from them, all 4 of them wired for sound and video. "Remember," Chen's voice came through their earpieces, "Webb is going to try to get inside your head. He's going to push every emotional button he can find. Don't let him." "Easier said than done," Elena murmured. "You're stronger than you think," David said quietly. "Stronger than he knows." Elena looked at this boy who'd become her anchor, her source of courage when her own ran thin. "How do you know?" "Because you chose us over your own safety. Because you're willing to risk everything to save children you've never met. Because when life knocked you down, you got back up swinging." The simple faith in David's voice gave Elena strength she didn't know she possessed. These children believed in her. They were counting on her to be the adult they deserved. She wouldn't let them down. Pier 47 looked different in daylight, less ominous, more like the abandoned industrial site it was. Rusted shipping containers, broken concrete, the smell of lake water and decay. But Elena could see why Webb had chosen it for their meeting. It was isolated, easily defensible, with multiple escape routes. Perfect for a predator. "He's here," Chen's voice crackled through their earpieces. Elena saw him then, a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive coat, standing near the water's edge like he owned the place. He looked exactly like what he claimed to be, a successful philanthropist, someone who donated to children's charities and had his picture taken with politicians. He looked nothing like a monster. That, Elena realized, was what made him so dangerous. "Stay close," she told the boys as they approached. "Whatever happens, we stick together." Webb turned as they drew near, and Elena got her first clear look at the man who'd been manipulating their lives. He was older than she'd expected, maybe 65, with silver hair and pale eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. "Elena," he said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. "You came. I wasn't entirely sure you would. You didn't give me much choice. We always have choices, my dear. That's what makes us human." His gaze shifted to the boys. "David, Miguel, Tommy, you look well. I trust Elena has been taking good care of you?" The boys pressed closer to Elena, forming a protective formation they'd probably perfected during their time at Harbor House. "What do you want, Webb?" Elena asked, cutting through his pleasantries. "Marcus, please. And I want what I've always wanted. What's best for these children." He gestured around the abandoned pier. "This place must bring back memories for you, David. Do you remember the last time we were here together?" David's jaw clenched. "I remember. Such an unpleasant business. But necessary. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect the family." Elena felt sick. Webb was talking about the murdered children like they'd been disciplinary problems rather than human beings. "Is that what you call murder now? Family discipline?" Webb's expression didn't change. "I call it natural selection. The strong survive, the weak provide lessons for the survivors." "You're insane." "I'm realistic. Elena, you of all people should understand. You've worked in emergency medicine. You've seen what the world does to children who aren't strong enough to protect themselves. I simply accelerate the process." Elena's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct she had as a mother and a healer was screaming at her to attack this monster, to make him pay for what he'd done to innocent children. But she forced herself to stay calm. The mission was bigger than her anger. "What does any of this have to do with me?" Webb smiled, and Elena understood why he'd been so successful for so long. The expression was warm, paternal, completely convincing. "Everything, my dear. You see, I've been watching you for years. Studying you. Learning about your strengths, your weaknesses, your deep need to save children as penance for the one you couldn't save." The words hit like physical blows, but Elena managed to keep her expression neutral. "You're a remarkable woman, Elena. A survivor, like me. You understand that the world is cruel, that children need to be prepared for reality, not coddled with false hope. I don't coddle children. I protect them. Do you? Or do you simply delay the inevitable? How many children have you watched die in that emergency room? How many could you have saved if they'd been stronger, tougher, more prepared for the harshness of life?" Elena's throat tightened. He was using her professional failures against her, the children she hadn't been able to save despite her best efforts. "Those children weren't weak," she said quietly. "They were victims. Exactly my point. Victims become victims because they're not prepared to fight back. I change that. I take vulnerable children and forge them into survivors. By abusing them? By teaching them that the world doesn't care about their tears, their fears, their desperate need to be loved. I teach them that strength comes from solidarity, that family means protecting each other no matter the cost." Despite herself, Elena could hear the twisted logic in his words. He genuinely believed he was helping these children, preparing them for a harsh world by subjecting them to controlled cruelty. It was the reasoning of a sociopath, but it was reasoning nonetheless. "What do you want from me?" she asked again. "I want you to join our family. You, and these 3 remarkable boys who've already proven they can survive anything." Elena's blood went cold. "Join you how? You're a nurse. You have access to vulnerable children through the hospital. You understand the system, know how to identify kids who won't be missed. You could help me expand our operation." There it was. The recruitment pitch Chen had predicted. "You want me to help you kidnap children. I want you to help me save them. From neglect, from abuse, from a system that treats them like disposable commodities. I want you to be part of something bigger than yourself." Elena looked at David, Miguel, and Tommy, seeing the fear and disgust in their young faces. These boys had lived under Webb's twisted version of protection for 2 years. They knew exactly what he was offering, and they were trusting her to make the right choice. "What would that look like?" she asked carefully. Webb's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "I have facilities in 3 states. Safe houses where children learn to be strong, to depend on each other, to survive without the false comfort of adult approval." You'd help me identify candidates, oversee their initial training, ensure their medical needs are met. And in return? Security. Purpose. The knowledge that you're helping create a generation of children who won't be victims. Who won't end up dead on emergency room tables because they were too weak to fight for their lives. Elena felt the wire taped to her chest, recording every word of Webb's confession. Chen and her team would have enough evidence now to arrest him, but they still needed information about his other facilities. It sounds interesting, she said slowly. But I'd need to see what you're talking about. Meet some of these children you've helped. Webb smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. There's a facility about an hour from here. 50 children, ranging in age from 6 to 16. All of them rescued from situations that would have destroyed weaker souls. Rescued or kidnapped? Semantics. The important thing is that they're alive, they're strong, and they're learning to take care of each other. Elena nodded slowly. I'd like to see it. Excellent. We can go now, if you'd like. I think you'll be impressed by what we've accomplished. As Webb led them toward a black SUV, Elena caught David's eye. The boy gave her an almost imperceptible nod. He understood what they were doing, why it was necessary. They were walking into the heart of Webb's operation, gathering evidence that would hopefully save dozens of children. It was dangerous, terrifying, and completely against protocol. It was also the right thing to do. Elena climbed into the SUV with Webb and the boys, feeling the weight of the recording equipment hidden on her body. Somewhere behind them, Chen's team was following at a discreet distance, ready to move in when they had what they needed. But as they drove away from the pier, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Webb was still playing a game she didn't fully understand. And that the real trap was still waiting to be sprung. The facility was nothing like Elena had expected. Instead of a dark, threatening compound, it looked like a summer camp. Red brick buildings nestled among trees, a playground visible in the distance, children's laughter echoing across manicured lawns. It was the perfect camouflage. Welcome to Haven House, Webb said as their SUV pulled through electronic gates that slid shut behind them with an ominous click. Home to some of the most resilient children you'll ever meet. Elena felt David tense beside her. The boy's knuckles were white where he gripped the door handle, and she could see the barely controlled panic in his eyes. You've been here before, she said quietly. This is where it started, David whispered. Before Harbor House. Before we learned to run. Webb overheard and turned to smile at them from the front passenger seat. David has such vivid memories of his early training. Don't you, son? The casual endearment made Elena's skin crawl. She could see how Webb operated now, the paternal facade, the reasonable tone, the way he made his abuse sound like education. As they approached the main building, Elena noticed details that shattered the summer camp illusion. Security cameras on every corner. Windows with bars disguised as decorative ironwork. Children playing in supervised groups, never alone, never unsupervised. How many children are here? She asked. 57 at the moment. We had to make some adjustments recently. Webb's tone suggested these adjustments hadn't been pleasant for everyone involved. They climbed out of the SUV, and Elena immediately noticed how the children reacted to Webb's presence. Conversation stopped. Laughter died. Young faces turned toward him with expressions of carefully controlled fear. These children had learned to hide their terror, but Elena could see it in their eyes. The same look she'd seen in David, Miguel, and Tommy's faces when they first knocked on her door. Mr. Webb. A woman emerged from the main building, hurrying toward them. She was middle-aged, professional-looking, with the kind of forced enthusiasm that immediately put Elena on guard. We weren't expecting you today. Plans change, Mrs. Patterson. I wanted to show our guest around the facility. Webb placed a possessive hand on Elena's shoulder. This is Elena Martinez. She's considering joining our family. Mrs. Patterson's smile became even more forced. "How wonderful. Would you like the full tour?" As they walked through the facility, Elena felt like she was touring a modern version of hell. On the surface, everything looked normal: classrooms where children studied, dining halls where they ate, dormitories where they slept. But underneath the veneer of normalcy was a system of carefully orchestrated control. Children spoke only when spoken to. They moved in orderly lines, eyes forward, expressions blank. When adults approached, they immediately stopped whatever they were doing and stood at attention. "The children seem very disciplined," Elena observed. "Structure is essential," Webb replied. "Children crave boundaries, clear expectations. They're happier when they know their place in the family hierarchy." Elena watched a group of younger children, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting in perfect rows while an adult read to them. Not one of them fidgeted or spoke out of turn. It was unnatural, disturbing. "David," she said quietly, "is this what Harbor House was like?" David's jaw was clenched so tightly she was afraid he might crack a tooth. "Harbor House was the reward," he whispered. "You got sent there if you proved you could follow the rules here." "And if you couldn't follow the rules?" David's eyes flicked toward a building set apart from the others, surrounded by a higher fence. "The Reflection Center." Elena felt her blood go cold. "What happens in the Reflection Center?" Before David could answer, Webb appeared at her elbow. "Ah, you've noticed our specialized facility. That's where children go when they need extra help understanding the importance of family loyalty." "Extra help?" "Intensive behavioral modification. Some children arrive with deeply ingrained patterns of selfishness, rebellion, attachment to their biological families. We help them overcome these obstacles." Elena stared at the isolated building, imagining what kind of help Webb provided there. The wire hidden beneath her clothes felt heavier, more important. Every word of this conversation needed to be recorded, preserved as evidence. "Could I see it?" she asked. Webb's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. "The Reflection Center? That's unusual. Most visitors prefer to see our success stories. I'd like to understand the complete program." For a long moment, Webb studied her face. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, projecting the kind of cold curiosity she imagined he'd want to see in a potential recruit. Finally, he nodded. "Of course. Mrs. Patterson, please take our other guests to see the recreation facilities. Elena and I will join you shortly." Elena started to protest. She didn't want to be separated from the boys, but David caught her eye and shook his head slightly. He understood. This was their chance to gather evidence about the worst of Webb's operation. Webb led her toward the Reflection Center, producing a key card to unlock the reinforced door. As they stepped inside, Elena was hit by the smell, disinfectant, fear, and something else she couldn't identify. The building was divided into small, windowless rooms. Through the open doors, Elena could see children sitting alone on narrow beds, staring at walls or reading from identical workbooks. "Solitary reflection," Webb explained. "Time to consider their place in the family, their responsibilities to the group." Elena peered into one of the rooms and saw a girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, sitting perfectly still with her hands folded in her lap. The child's eyes were vacant, distant, like she'd retreated somewhere deep inside herself to survive. "How long do they stay here?" "As long as necessary. Some children learn quickly. Others require more intensive intervention." Elena's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to grab this little girl and run, to get her away from this place immediately. But she forced herself to maintain her cover. "What kind of intervention?" Webb stopped in front of a door marked "Private Session Room." Through a small window, Elena could see medical equipment, restraining devices, things that belonged in a torture chamber rather than a children's facility. "Some children have deeply ingrained trauma responses," Webb said. his voice taking on the clinical tone of someone discussing treatment options. They've been conditioned by their previous experiences to expect rescue, to believe that adults will always prioritize their emotional needs over their development needs. Elena felt sick. So you break them down? I rebuild them. I show them that the world doesn't care about their tears, their fears, their desperate need to be loved. I teach them that strength comes from within, that survival depends on accepting reality rather than clinging to false hope. Elena stared through the window at the medical equipment, her mind racing. This wasn't just abuse, it was systematic psychological torture designed to destroy children's capacity for trust, love, and hope. Elena? Webb was watching her carefully. You look disturbed. She forced herself to compose her features. It's more intensive than I expected. The work we do here isn't for everyone. It requires a certain detachment. The ability to see past a child's temporary distress to their long-term benefit. Elena nodded slowly, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to expose this monster immediately. But Chen's voice echoed in her earpiece. Stay in character. We need locations of other facilities. How many other places like this do you operate? She asked. 3 primary facilities, plus several smaller safe houses for specialized cases. Would you like to see our records? Meet some of our success stories? Elena's heart leapt. If she could get access to Webb's files, they'd have everything they needed to coordinate simultaneous raids and rescue all the children in his network. Yes, she said, I'd like to understand the full scope of the operation. Webb smiled, and Elena realized with growing horror that he genuinely believed he was winning her over. In his twisted worldview, any rational adult would see the logic in his methods once they understood the alternative was raising weak children who couldn't survive in a harsh world. They returned to the main building, where Mrs. Patterson was waiting with David, Miguel, and Tommy. Elena could see the strain in the boys' faces. Being back in this place was taking a psychological toll, bringing back memories they'd tried to suppress. How are you doing? She asked David quietly as Webb spoke with Mrs. Patterson. I remember everything now, David whispered. Things I'd blocked out. Elena, some of the kids we saw today. They were here when we were. They've been in this place for years. Elena's heart broke for the children trapped in Webb's system, and for David having to relive his trauma. But his information was valuable. He could identify long-term victims, help law enforcement understand the full extent of Webb's operation. Can you hold on a little longer? She asked. David nodded, though she could see the effort it cost him. Webb returned to their group. Elena, I'd like to show you our administrative offices. You can review our protocols, see how we track each child's progress, understand the metrics we use to measure success. As they walked toward the office building, Elena noticed something that made her blood freeze. Through a window on the second floor, she caught a glimpse of a woman in a white coat, someone who looked remarkably familiar. It couldn't be, but as they climbed the stairs to the administrative level, Elena's worst fears were confirmed. The woman emerged from an office, and Elena found herself face to face with Dr. Sarah Chen. Not Detective Sarah Chen. Dr. Sarah Chen, wearing a medical coat and carrying a clipboard, looking every inch the professional healthcare provider. Elena's mind reeled. The detective who'd promised to help them, who'd coordinated their undercover operation, who was supposed to be monitoring their safety from a distance. She was here, inside Webb's facility, dressed like she belonged. Elena, Dr. Chen said with a warm smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus told me you might be joining our team. I'm so pleased to meet you. Elena felt the world tilting around her. The wire she was wearing, the backup team supposedly following them, the entire operation, had it all been a setup? Dr. Chen oversees our medical protocols, Webb explained. She ensures all our children receive proper health care during their adjustment period. Adjustment period, Elena repeated numbly. The initial weeks can be physically demanding, Dr. Chen said with clinical detachment. Children often resist the program at first. We've developed very effective methods for helping them understand that compliance is in their best interest. Elena stared at this woman who'd sat across from her in a police station conference room just hours earlier, who'd listened to the boys describe their trauma, who'd promised to keep them safe. How long had she been working with Webb? How much of their rescue had been orchestrated? Elena? Webb was watching her with concern. You look pale. I'm fine, she managed. Just processing everything. But she wasn't fine. She was trapped in the heart of Webb's operation with 3 vulnerable children, wearing a wire that was probably being monitored by the enemy, trusting backup that might not exist. David stepped closer to her, sensing her distress. What's wrong? He whispered. Elena couldn't answer without blowing their cover. But she caught David's eye and mouthed a single word: run. David's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to grim determination. He moved almost imperceptibly closer to Miguel and Tommy, preparing to act on Elena's signal. Let's continue the tour, Webb said. I want to show you our success metrics, our placement statistics for children who've completed the program. As they walked down the hallway, Elena's mind raced through their options. They were in the middle of a secured compound, surrounded by Webb's people, with no way to contact legitimate law enforcement. The boys were traumatized and exhausted. She had no weapons, no backup, no plan. But she had something Webb didn't expect: the fierce protective instincts of a mother who'd already lost 1 child and refused to lose 3 more. Webb led them into a large office filled with filing cabinets, computers, and charts tracking children like inventory. These are our detailed records, he said proudly. Every child's progress, every milestone, every adjustment to their treatment protocol. Elena moved toward the nearest filing cabinet, pretending to study the labels while actually looking for anything that might serve as a weapon. Her fingers found the handle of a heavy metal letter opener. The documentation is quite impressive, she said, palming the letter opener. We're very thorough. Dr. Chen insists on meticulous medical records, and I demand detailed behavioral assessments. Dr. Chen smiled coldly. Children can be quite manipulative when they want something. Detailed records help us identify patterns of deception. Elena met her gaze steadily. I imagine you've become quite skilled at identifying deception. Something shifted in Dr. Chen's expression. Indeed. For instance, I can usually tell when someone is wearing a recording device. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Chen knew. Had probably known from the beginning. Elena, Webb said gently, please remove the wire. Elena's hand tightened on the letter opener. Around her, she could sense movement, security personnel positioning themselves, exits being blocked, the trap finally springing shut. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Webb sighed. Elena, please. We've been monitoring police communications all morning. We know about Detective Chen's task force. We know about the supposed backup team. We know about the recording equipment you're wearing. Elena's heart sank. There had never been a real Detective Chen. The woman who'd claimed to be investigating Webb had been working for him all along, playing an elaborate game to lure Elena and the boys into his grasp. The boys, she said desperately. Let them go. You have me. That's what you wanted. Oh, but Elena, Webb said sadly, that's where you're wrong. I never wanted just you. I wanted all of you. A ready-made family unit, perfectly bonded by shared trauma and mutual protection. Elena looked at David, Miguel, and Tommy, seeing the fear in their young faces as they realized the scope of the betrayal. These children had trusted her to protect them, and she'd walked them straight into the enemy's hands. But she wasn't done fighting yet. You're right, she said, reaching slowly for the wire taped to her chest. I am wearing a recording device. As everyone's attention focused on her movement, Elena caught David's eye and gave him the slightest nod toward the door. Then she drove the letter opener deep into Webb's shoulder and screamed, "Run!" Chaos erupted. Webb screamed in pain and surprise, blood streaming down his expensive shirt. Dr. Chen lunged for a panic button on the wall. Security personnel rushed toward Elena. But David, Miguel, and Tommy were already moving. 3 children who'd spent years learning to run from danger, to hide, to survive. They bolted for the door like their lives depended on it. Because they did. Elena threw herself between the boys and their pursuers, fighting with the desperate strength of a mother protecting her children. She managed to trip one security guard, throw a computer monitor at another, create enough chaos to give the boys a head start. But there were too many of them. Hands grabbed her arms, her shoulders, her hair. Someone hit her across the face hard enough to split her lip. She tasted blood and kept fighting anyway. "Find them," Webb gasped, clutching his wounded shoulder. "Lock down the entire facility. They can't have gotten far." Elena was dragged to a chair and restrained with zip ties that cut into her wrists. Blood ran down her chin from her split lip, but she managed to smile through the pain. "They're gone," she said. "And they know the truth about this place. They're children," Dr. Chen said coldly. "Traumatized, scared children with no way to contact the outside world. They'll be found within the hour. You don't know those boys very well." Webb studied Elena's face, noting the certainty in her voice. "What aren't you telling me?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "David spent 2 years in this place, learning every hiding spot, every weakness in your security, every way to get in and out without being seen. Miguel grew up on the streets before Harbor House. He knows how to disappear, how to survive on nothing. And Tommy." Elena smiled again, wider this time. "Tommy is a genius with electronics. Do you really think your surveillance system is as secure as you believe?" Webb's face went pale. He turned to Dr. Chen. "Check the cameras. All of them." Dr. Chen moved to a computer terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Her expression grew increasingly alarmed. "The external cameras are down," she reported. "All of them. And someone's been in our communication system." Elena's smile became triumphant. "Tommy hacked your network while we were touring the facility. Everything you said, everything you showed me, it's all being broadcast live to every major news outlet in Chicago." It was a bluff. Elena had no idea if Tommy had actually managed to access Webb's systems, or if anyone was monitoring their situation. But she knew these children, knew their capabilities, knew their determination to protect each other. And she knew that Webb's greatest weakness was his arrogance, his certainty that he was always the smartest person in the room. Webb stared at her, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. Finally, he turned to one of his security guards. "Kill her," he said quietly. "Make it look like an accident. Tell the staff she tried to escape and fell down the stairs." Elena felt her blood go cold, but she kept her expression defiant. She'd bought the boys time to escape, maybe saved dozens of other children by exposing Webb's operation. If this was how her story ended, at least it would have meaning. But before the guard could move, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights flashed red, and a computerized voice announced, "Lockdown breach. External perimeter compromised. All personnel report to emergency stations." Webb's face went white. "What's happening?" Dr. Chen was frantically typing at her computer. "Federal agents," she said tersely. "FBI, Chicago PD, Illinois State Police. They're surrounding the compound." Elena's heart soared. Somehow, impossibly, the boys had managed to get help. Real help. "Elena Martinez." A voice boomed through external speakers. "This is Special Agent Rodriguez, FBI. We know you're in there. We're here to get you and the children out safely." Webb grabbed a pistol from his desk drawer, pressing it against Elena's temple. "Tell them to back off," he snarled. "Tell them I'll kill you and every child in this facility if they don't withdraw immediately." Elena looked at this man who'd spent years torturing children in the name of love, who believed his twisted methods were helping them become stronger. She thought about Isabella, about the children she'd been unable to save in the about David and Miguel and Tommy trusting her to protect them. "No," she said quietly. Webb's finger tightened on the trigger. "Elena, I said no. These children have suffered enough. They deserve better than being used as bargaining chips by a monster who calls abuse love. You'll die for nothing. This facility will be rebuilt. The children will be transferred. The work will continue. Will it?" Elena smiled through her split lip. "Because I think you're forgetting something important." "What? Those 3 boys you spent years training to be survivors? They just survived you. And they're going to make sure the whole world knows what you really are." Through the office windows, Elena could see federal agents moving across the compound, coordinating with each other through hand signals, preparing to storm the building. Professional, efficient, and completely focused on rescuing the children inside. It was the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. Webb's hand was shaking now, sweat beading on his forehead as he realized his empire was collapsing around him. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Yes," Elena said with absolute certainty, "it is." The office door exploded inward. Federal agents poured into the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Webb spun toward them, his gun still pressed to Elena's head, but he was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. "Drop your weapon," Agent Rodriguez shouted. "Now." For a moment, Webb hesitated. Elena could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing his options, considering whether to take her life out of spite. Then David appeared in the doorway behind the federal agents. "Mr. Webb," the boy said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd survived hell and emerged stronger. "It's over. Let her go." Webb looked at David. This child he'd tried to break, tried to mold into his image, and saw someone he no longer recognized. Someone who'd chosen love over fear, family over survival, hope over the harsh realities Webb had tried to teach him. Someone who'd proven that Webb's entire philosophy was wrong. The gun clattered to the floor. Elena felt hands lifting her up, cutting away the zip ties, checking her injuries with professional efficiency. But her attention was focused on 3 boys pushing through the crowd of law enforcement officers, their faces bright with relief and joy and triumph. David reached her first, throwing his arms around her despite the federal agents trying to keep the scene secure. Miguel and Tommy were right behind him, creating a tangle of arms and tears and whispered reassurances that they were all safe, all together, all alive. "How?" Elena asked through her tears. "How did you do it?" "Tommy really did hack their system while we were touring," David explained. "When you gave us the signal to run, he activated a program that sent everything we'd recorded to news outlets and law enforcement agencies across 3 states. Miguel remembered a maintenance tunnel from when we were here before," Tommy added. "We got outside, found a phone, called the real FBI. The real detective Sarah Chen was in the federal task force that's been hunting Webb for years," Miguel finished. "She said to tell you thank you for being the bait that finally let them catch him." Elena laughed through her tears, holding these 3 remarkable children who'd saved her as much as she'd tried to save them. Around them, federal agents were securing the scene, arresting Webb and his associates, beginning the complex process of rescuing 57 children from a nightmare that had masqueraded as love. "Is it really over?" David asked quietly. Elena looked through the office windows at the federal agents coordinating the rescue operation, at the news vans already gathering outside the compound gates, at the beginning of justice for children who'd been hurt for too long. "Yes," she said with absolute certainty. "It's really over." But even as she said the words, Elena knew that the real work was just beginning. Webb's arrest was only the first step. There would be trials, investigations, the long process of helping dozens of traumatized children heal from years of systematic abuse. There would be paperwork and bureaucracy and the complex challenge of legally adopting 3 boys who'd chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. There would be therapy for all of them. Learning to trust again. Learning to live with the memories of what they'd endured and survived. There would be difficult days ahead. Moments when the trauma felt too heavy to carry. Times when love alone wouldn't be enough to heal the damage that had been done. But they would face it together. As a family. The kind of family built not on blood or law or obligation, but on choice. On the conscious decision to protect each other, to stand together against whatever darkness the world might throw at them, to believe that love really was stronger than fear. As federal agents escorted them out of the compound, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of someone trying to outrun guilt, but the steady, certain hope of someone who'd found their purpose. She was no longer Elena Martinez, the broken nurse who couldn't save her daughter. She was Elena Martinez, mother to David, Miguel, and Tommy. Survivor. Fighter. Protector of children. And for the first time since Isabella's death, that felt like enough. Epilogue. 6 months later. The house was too small for 4 people, but somehow they made it work. Elena had sold her apartment and used the money, along with a substantial reward from the FBI, to buy a 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood where children played in front yards and neighbors looked out for each other. David had the bedroom that used to be Elena's home office. Miguel and Tommy shared the larger room, with bunk beds they'd picked out together and walls covered with Miguel's artwork and Tommy's computer diagrams. Elena slept on a pull-out couch in the living room and called it the best bed she'd ever owned. "Elena," David called from the kitchen. "Miguel's burning breakfast again." "I'm not burning it," Miguel protested. "It's just extra crispy." Elena smiled as she padded toward the kitchen in her pajamas and slippers. This was what Sunday mornings were supposed to sound like. Children arguing about pancakes. The smell of coffee, only slightly burned. The chaos of family life in all its imperfect glory. Tommy was already at the table, reading a newspaper article about the Webb trial on his tablet. At 9 years old, he was probably the most informed person in Chicago about federal prosecution procedures. "The defense is claiming Webb was mentally ill," Tommy reported. "They're asking for a reduced sentence." "What does that mean?" Miguel asked, pausing in his battle with the smoke detector. "It means his lawyers are grasping at straws," Elena said, taking over pancake duties from Miguel. 57 counts of child abuse, multiple counts of kidnapping and human trafficking, 3 counts of murder. "He's never getting out of prison." David nodded with satisfaction. "Good. What about Dr. Chen?" Elena's expression darkened slightly. The fake detective Chen had been revealed as Dr. Sarah Webb, Marcus Webb's daughter, who'd spent years helping her father perfect his methods of psychological manipulation. She was facing her own set of charges, though her cooperation with prosecutors might earn her a reduced sentence. 25 to life, Elena said. "She'll be eligible for parole in 15 years. "That's not long enough," David said quietly. Elena understood his anger. Dr. Chen had betrayed their trust at the most vulnerable moment, used their desperation against them. But Elena had also learned something about forgiveness in the months since Webb's arrest. "Maybe," she said gently. "But holding on to anger hurts us more than it hurts her." David considered this, then nodded slowly. At 13, he was learning lessons about justice and mercy that most adults never mastered. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Elena asked. Tomorrow was the day David, Miguel, and Tommy would testify at Webb's trial. Elena would be there too, recounting everything she'd witnessed at Haven House. It would be difficult, traumatic, but also necessary. The boys needed to tell their stories. Other children needed to hear that survivors could speak truth to power and be believed. "We're ready," David said, and Elena heard the quiet strength in his voice. "We've been ready for a long time." After breakfast, they settled into their Sunday routine. Miguel worked on a painting, a landscape of a house surrounded by flowers, with 4 figures standing together in the yard. Tommy tinkered with a computer program he was developing to help identify human trafficking networks. David studied for his high school placement exams, determined to catch up academically despite the years he'd lost. Elena paid bills, did laundry, and marveled at how normal their life had become. These small domestic tasks felt like miracles after everything they'd been through. Her phone rang as she was folding Tommy's T-shirts. The caller ID showed her sister Maria's number. "Hello, stranger," Maria said warmly. "We haven't heard from you in weeks." Elena felt a familiar stab of guilt. Since adopting the boys, she'd been so focused on their family unit that she'd neglected other relationships, including the sister who'd tried to stay connected through Elena's darkest years. "I know. I'm sorry. Things have been complicated?" "Good," Elena said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Things have been really good. I'm glad. The kids are dying to meet their new cousins. Any chance you could bring the boys to dinner next Sunday?" Elena looked around the living room at her makeshift family. David hunched over his books, Miguel's artistic supplies spread across the coffee table, Tommy's keyboard clicking as he typed code. They were still healing, still learning to trust that adults could be relied upon not to abandon them. But maybe it was time to expand their circle, to show them that family could be broader than just the 4 people in this house. "Let me ask them," Elena said. "But I think they'd like that." After she hung up, Elena found herself thinking about Isabella. Her daughter would have been 10 now, maybe helping Elena teach the boys to make her famous chocolate chip cookies, or reading stories to Tommy, or listening to Miguel talk about art. The grief was still there, would always be there. But it no longer felt like a weight dragging her down. Instead, it felt like a reminder to cherish what she had, to be present for the children who needed her now. "Elena?" David appeared at her elbow, holding a letter. "This came for you yesterday. I forgot to give it to you." Elena looked at the return address and felt her breath catch. It was from Haven House, or rather, from the federal facility that had taken over Webb's compound and was now serving as a rehabilitation center for his victims. Inside was a hand-drawn card from a little girl named Sophia, not Sophia Valdez, who'd died in the hospital that night, but another Sophia who'd been rescued from Webb's network. The drawing showed stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the words, "Thank you for saving us," written in careful crayon letters. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "What is it?" Miguel asked, coming to look over her shoulder. "A thank you card. From one of the children we helped save." Tommy joined them at the kitchen table. "How many kids were there? In all of Webb's places?" Elena thought about the final tally from the FBI investigation. 86 children recovered. Dozens more who aged out of his system over the years and are now adults. "Are they okay?" David asked quietly. Elena knew he was really asking whether it was possible to recover from the kind of trauma Webb inflicted. Whether the damage could be healed, whether love could triumph over systematic cruelty. "They're survivors," she said, using the word deliberately. "Like you. Like all of us. And survivors are stronger than they know." David nodded, accepting this truth that he'd learned through experience rather than words. As evening approached, the boys gravitated toward each other the way they always did when the day was ending. Miguel and Tommy curled up on either side of David on the couch, their unofficial family arrangement that meant safety, protection, love. Elena settled into her reading chair, a battered recliner that had been Isabella's favorite spot for bedtime stories. She opened a book about trauma recovery, part of her ongoing effort to understand how to help her boys heal. But she found herself watching them instead of reading. David's protective arm around Tommy. Miguel's head resting on David's shoulder. 3 children who'd endured hell and emerged with their capacity for love not only intact but strengthened. They'd taught her something invaluable. That family wasn't about perfection or traditional structures or having all the answers. Family was about showing up, staying present, choosing each other again and again even when it was hard. Family was about love that refused to give up, even in the darkest moments. Elena? Tommy's sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. She looked at this brilliant, sensitive boy who'd learned to read adults' emotions as a survival skill, who still worried that the people who claimed to love him might change their minds. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'm happy. Good, Tommy said, snuggling deeper into David's side. We're happy too. As the boys dozed off together on the couch, Elena sat in Isabella's chair and thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Broken, guilt-ridden, convinced that she was too damaged to be trusted with anyone else's well-being. She thought about the woman she was now, mother to 3 remarkable boys, survivor of her own trauma, believer in second chances and the power of chosen family. The journey from one woman to the other had been terrifying, dangerous, and absolutely worth every moment of fear. Elena Martinez closed her book, turned off the lights, and settled onto her pull-out couch. Around her, the house breathed with the quiet sounds of family. David's soft snores, Miguel's sleep-talking, Tommy's unconscious movements as he sought warmth and comfort. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The trial, the media attention, the ongoing work of healing and growing and learning to trust in a world that had shown them its capacity for both cruelty and kindness. But tonight, they were safe. They were together. They were home. And for Elena Martinez, who'd learned that love really was stronger than fear, that was everything she'd ever wanted.